Okay, this is a quick diary. This is day one, the first full day that I've really had to listen to the Campfire Audio ATLAS. You're looking at a song called "The Chain" by Fleetwood Mac, and if you're familiar with it, it's got a bass line that goes dun 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 dun, and it also sounds like one of the strings, the lowest, is loose. It was intentionally, so the decay of the string is a little longer than usual, and it's intentionally done by the bassist. It's pretty clear. If you grew up with a house system, let me adjust this a little bit. You've got a bass driver, a mid driver, and then a tweeter. Just a basic setup, you've got 3 drivers. In the personal audio world, you're usually dealing with a single driver. So the bass note on this in a home system is never an issue because the larger driver in your speaker is taking care of that. And when they start to come in with a chorus saying, yeah, keep us together, da-na-na-na-na, everything's kind of, there's a crescendo of music going on, and the bass is playing over the vocals at that time. Now, when you listen to headphones or in-ear monitors, earphones, a song like this would be a good example where if the bass was overwhelming or bloated, where it's extending out into the early mids, that moment where the bass is being pulled and that one string at least is a little bit loose and is decaying very slowly, and the vocals are coming in at the same time, and the bass is basically playing over that. In anything that has a bass that is overwhelming or is tuned a little bit late, too close to the mids, that's going to be an issue. That is not an issue with these. Listening to that song, "The Chain," with the Atlas by Campfire Audio, is a extremely enjoyable experience. There is no issue with the bass. It's there as it's supposed to be, and the mids are coming in, the vocals of basically everybody in the band, with no problem. Psychoacoustics is a science, like any science. There are people that major in it and they study it, and it's the study and the science of the way that the ear perceives and catches and turns into information that the brain creates an image with. A couple examples on the most basic level. This is done with filters and compressors and masking and all kinds of very, very fancy stuff in the studio. Multiple layers, put one on the other. In the very simplest form on a 10-band EQ, which is as simple as you can possibly get, tricks like 10 kilohertz, excuse me, being slightly elevated relative to 8 and 12 gives a sense of space. It's the way that the ear and the brain work, and it's the way that technicians, you can get onto the internet if you want. I've been doing this for years. I've got videos on my channel about EQing. For example, if you were to EQ for bass, you would find the point by sweeping where the bass driver or the driver that you're trying to maximize, make optimal, find out where that hit is. Is it 55 hertz? Where is that producing at its best? And then you take into effect that 1 kilohertz and also 2.5 is where the pluck and the tapping of a bass guitar, there's the fundamental would be down in the 55, for example, and then the harmonic extension of the bass note would be 1.5 or 1 and then 2.5. So that note dun is actually the fundamental point might be 55 hertz, but the other half second dun, instead of dun dun, the second half of that sound is the fundamental sound, the harmonic sound, and that is the one that's going out to 1 or 2.5. If you EQ something just for bass, like rock and roll, and you just want to, you can't, EQ is what, you don't want to do EQ too much, because the further you go into it, it's like a rabbit hole and you never get out. Your bass line is gone. But EQing for bass, EQing the bass, and then 1 and then 2.5 on most studio tuned drivers is going to give you no penalty in the mids or the treble, and it's going to give you that extended bass harmonic sound because where that exists, you have compensated for by making it prominent, not just elevating the bass, but elevating the harmonic section of that. So everything has a fundamental and a harmonic section, the initial and then the residual that comes after that. I'm 5 minutes in, and I'm not talking about this as much as I should. It's day one. The narrative of the Cascade having a lot of bass is absolutely correct. The discussion is whether or not that interferes with the mids, and if it does, how much it does so. And I get that. I played with filters, and I found the 4 to be personally the best, but that's all personal taste. The narrative on the Comets is also like big bass and big sound, and that's not the same thing. Big bass is big bass, and I don't think these have big bass because listening to another song, Girls Got Rhythm by AC/DC, there's a strong bass line in that, and it's not jumping out at me as something that sounds any more than it was mastered into the track. Enough so that I was a little bit taken aback because of what people said before I listened to these. I expected, powerful bass, and I got big sound, which is not the same as powerful bass. And these actually only have, as far as a breather hole, see if I can get this, you can just see it. It's a tough focus because of the mirror. Can we get it? No, shit. There's a little hole right in the back right there. And that is really about the only ventilation that this driver is getting outside of the front. But through the back, it's not getting a lot. So the Sony EX1000s or the EX series have kind of a big screen, and there's some open back IEMs that give a very wide sense of space because you're catching outside air, which is like open back headphones. You're not really sealing up your ear canal. These don't really have that. However, they've got a very big sound, and that sounds like something in the treble, instead of being up and down like this, like the EX1000s, which I love, and I've adjusted to where the peaks and valleys are, and I don't really mess with it because I've adjusted to it. This doesn't really sound like it's got any odd peaks in the treble. As a matter of fact, cymbal crashes sound really fantastic. And again, Campfire Audio is making something that has really good rock and roll playback. Well, you got guitars that got distortion and distortion pedals, and the absolute sonic chaos that is an electric guitar with an axe god going nuts is really hard for a driver to keep up with and to do, and then all the other stuff that's going on at the same time. These Campfires seem to do really good with that. So that's another thing that makes me think that they're actually really careful with their tuning of this. They're listening to it. That's not it. This is it. They do that. Others don't. Some do it a little. They seem like they pay quite a lot of attention to that. So it plays rock and roll exceptionally well. I'm not to the point where I'm really amping these yet, so maybe they will become really powerhouses bass-wise. This is the ARM2. It's one of the more powerful DAPs out there in single end that I'm aware of. It's pretty potent. I can do a bass test with it without an amp. And the i5 by K and a couple others, regardless of power specs, some do, some don't. The i5 did, and this one does. It's got a B1S on the back, but that doesn't need that. So I'll get into amping later. These have a big presentation, which makes you sound like you've got something of a semi-open back, though it's not really. And you've got bass that is there when it is in the master. I'm not hearing anything. Nothing is interrupting the mids that I'm picking up yet. So day one, listening to Fleetwood Mac and listening to a song where I become used to something that's doing otherwise pretty well. Once the bass line starts to overlap the chorus, it becomes a little bit chaotic. That's not actually happening with this. So I'm going to extrapolate and surmise that this is not really a bassy IM. I guess it's got the potential, but it's not really doing it for me yet. It's just playing music really well. So that is my 10-minute first diary. This is not burn-in. This is not balanced. This is not something that some people believe and some don't. Psychoacoustics and the way that people use it in the mixing studio is science, and it's science applied in the studio. And companies take those tricks and they incorporate it into the tuning depending on the sound that they're going for. They don't just pull stuff out of the air. There are frequency manipulations that you get onto Google and search psychoacoustics, tricks of psychoacoustics, and then look at how they explain it. And they'll talk about it in a studio in a science sense. If you find some places, they'll break it down at the minute level, which would be basic EQ, and how you can simulate a kick drum and a bass guitar, which are the same notes happening at the same time, at the same place on your driver, and how to make it seem like that's an event that's happening separately. And one of the tricks is to make a notch between the fundamental and the harmonic point of separation for the bass line. And it gives the brain the illusion that there is space between the kick drum and the bass guitar, when there is none on the driver or the way that it's played. There you have a single driver playing a bassist and a kick drum, and they're happening at the exact same moment in time, but your brain can, with a little bit of trickery, be made to believe that it sounds better without someone suggesting it to you. It's something that people do prior, and they do it in tuning so that it sounds better. And people say, it sounds like there's more separation between instruments. Well, they did that on purpose, man. The brain and how it works with sound is something that's studied by professionals, and they apply it in this hobby a lot, all the time. And in the treble, the space sense that this is given off without being open in the back makes me feel like there is a very nice roll in the treble without any odd dips where you're lacking something next to something that is accentuated. There is that, it would seem to me, or there is certainly not a notch at 10K, because that would be the TH900s by Fostex, and that sounded really closed and compact, and it is right because of it's right because of the 10K dip. That's the original version of the TH900s. That's why that sounded like it did. And it's science. It's not opinion. The bass head channel is something that I started, and also the thread, because bass was something you can crank up and kind of look at it, and stuff can do it or stuff can't. So I was drawn to that because it took a lot of the opinion out and just said, using this piece of kit and this song and these settings, this will do this. And then people could try to copy it if they wanted or not. That was one of the only things in the hobby that could be, visually mimicked and copied. All of the burning cables and all that other stuff is opinion. Psychoacoustics is science. So the way that this is tuned, there was consideration, it seems, made to the listener more than companies usually do, because some people are saying this has lots of bass. Maybe that's their perception. I'm not perceiving it that way because of my impression of what that equals, what big bass is. In the sense that it interrupts the mid frequencies, I can say strongly, in my opinion, there is no interruption of the mids. Using this song, The Chain by Fleetwood Mac, it's a DSD, whatever, I'm using a DSD, there is no degradation as the bass guitar and what sounds like a loose string with a long decay is playing right over the top of people doing the chorus. And that often is the case, and you just accept it because you got a single driver and the headphone or the IEM. This is actually playing it really well. So that's a specific song, a specific part of a song, and what it's not doing, which is messing it up. Sounds really good. That's 14 minutes. I'm sorry, that was way too long. I'm out. This is just a diary. It's going to be not published. This will be my thoughts combined and then done in the final review.